Good evening from Vietnam. Good afternoon to you, Chris. Thanks a lot for spending your afternoon joining our Inside Sharing and share your stories to our global audience. And on behalf of the listeners around the world, we want to say thank you to you.
Well, thank you very much for inviting me onto Insight Sharing, and really looking forward to sharing some stories with your listeners.
And before this conversation, I'm so excited to hear that the publisher in Vietnam already contacted you, and maybe for the translation and publication of your first book, the first minute. In Vietnam, I'm really excited for our readers in this country, and also it's open an opportunity for us to meet you in person here also. So I look forward to that, my friend.
Yes, me too. So nothing is set yet, but it's always nice to be asked,
Yes.
and we'll see what happens. But that sort of Vietnam, that area of the world is somewhere that we're looking forward to coming to. My wife and I have a big world map in our living room, and we've got pins in it for places we want to go. And there's a lot of dream pins in your region. So we're going to be taking some trips, not this year, probably not next year, but when our daughter's just a little bit older, we are certainly going to be heading east from where we are.
Wow, and then by then you have a new friend, new family here. Okay, so if you, your wife, your family, or your friend decided to go to Vietnam and heading to Ho Chi Minh City in the south, and I'm here, and let us know, and we would love to take you out to see how beautiful our country is.
I will definitely take you up on that. Thank you.
And for the little taste of our culture, it's very honored if we can have Chris to introduce a little bit about himself and the work he's doing. So can you do that for us, please?
Absolutely. Hello, my name is Chris Fenning, and I teach communication skills. Now, what does that mean? Because it's a very broad area. I look at very practical ways to improve everyday common communication situations at work. Things like writing emails, having meetings, giving status updates, talking to executives, how to ask good questions in the workplace. Those are the kind of things that if we can get just a little bit better at them each day, our jobs are easier. And who doesn't want an easier job, right?
Yeah.
So I do this by writing books, delivering training, working with people one-on-one, coming into organizations and helping everyone from the intern up to the executive board. So if there's a particular communication situation at work that people are struggling with, I'd love to know about it, because I've either got part of a solution or I want to add it to my list and provide a solution just to make work a little bit, and communication at work just a little bit less painful.
Wonderful, wonderful. And Chris, you have a wonderful career, wonderful journey, and you're doing a wonderful works to help making work a better place for everybody, right? And you introduced to us in less than 90 seconds, and that's not fair for our audience at all. So, so the purpose for this conversation is for them to know more about the journey that taking you to doing the amazing work that you are doing. So let's travel time together and figure that journey out. Is that okay with you?
Absolutely. I've got my time travel button ready. You let me know when to hit it and we'll zap back in time.
Ready. Woo. So when I was little, Chris, I always wanted to become an astronaut. Okay, so wearing a jumpsuit and a suit and jumping in different planets seems very, very cool, right? But life didn't give me any chance to do, the work that I love doing, and it took me to a very different territory. So for you, when you was little, what was your dream about yourself and the works you're gonna do in the future, though?
Well, as a child, I lacked imagination. I didn't have a lot of imagination when I was small, and I would just do, and this is what my dad takes a lot of joy in telling me, that I didn't know how to play as a kid. He said, you were very strange. You didn't know how to play. It was odd. But there was one thing that I was interested in, and that was aeroplanes. And so because it was the one thing that my family said, well, clearly you're interested in this, everything that happened to me, all like gifts or conversations with relatives, always ended up being about aeroplanes. And so I ended up just wanting to be a pilot. I didn't have a big burning desire. I didn't run around with my arms out pretending to fly. People would ask me and I'd say, oh, I want to be a pilot. And I don't really know why. It was just that connection with aeroplanes. And so that was the one thing that apparently I wanted to be when I grew up. Other than a dinosaur, I wanted to be a dinosaur when I grew up. That one I do remember wanting, but the only real thing I could actually do was be a pilot.
So being the pilot into what you are doing now is totally in a different world, right? So tell us how that dreams, leading the way for you, to your teenage and to your university time. Can you share?
Yes. So I carried on the pilot path for quite a few years. When I was between 16 and 18, I was awarded 2 scholarships by the British Royal Air Force. And the first was to learn how to fly gliders, so airplanes without engines. And I went through that training and I got my wings, I got my certification to fly gliders. And then I got the second scholarship to learn to fly powered planes, and I started the training at a civilian airfield, but paid for by the Royal Air Force. And the goal was to get my private pilot's license and then join the Air Force. But, and I laugh because I was going through this process and I was very fortunate, but it turns out I wasn't very good at being told what to do. And when you're joining the military, you kind of need to be good at being told what to do, and that wasn't a strength of mine. Not because I was disobedient or because I would break the rules. It's if I saw something that wasn't working as well as it could, I'd go, why can't we do that differently? Because it would be more efficient if. And that just doesn't work very well in a very rigid hierarchical military environment. And so I did not go into the Air Force. And so I left school at 18, having trained to be a pilot, started that journey, but no longer going into the Air Force. So the next thing that was kind of obvious, or at least from where I was standing, was I would do engineering, and I would do aerospace engineering, because that was planes and satellites. So I did aeronautics and astronautics. So I got to do planes and space because they were interesting to me. And I left the pilot stuff behind me. I haven't flown since then, not since I was 18 or 19, haven't flown, but did go into aerospace engineering. And then I spent 20 years doing that before, I spent 20 years transitioning through lots of different jobs before doing what I do now.
So tell us how from graduate and then I saw that you travel the world, do a different you work in many countries. When you were little, have you ever thought of one day you're going to travel the world and do a lot of and work?
No, when I was young, travel wasn't something that we got to do very much of. My parents didn't have a lot of money, and so foreign travel. I think we went abroad from England to Spain, which is a very common sort of family holiday for a lot of people in the UK. But we went maybe twice that I remember, and that was it. And that was an incredibly special thing to be able to do that. Most of our holidays were in a caravan, like within our own country. So travel was something I didn't really do until I started working after university. Throughout university, a lot of my friends went skiing or they went with their families away, and I simply couldn't afford it. And so I went to work instead. I worked while they were on ski vacations or traveling around Europe or visiting America. So travel was something that was introduced to me through work. I left university and I joined a defense company, an engineering defense company, and immediately got to start traveling the world. And it was a really eye-opening experience, and something that I wasn't used to. I remember having to apply for a passport because I didn't have one. That was how little traveling I'd done. I didn't have a passport, and it was wonderful. So I started in these jobs that initially took me in Europe, but eventually took me to Taiwan, Korea, America, Canada, a lot of Central Europe, and just had the most incredible time doing a job. This was mostly for a telecoms company, actually. I'd worked in defense for 2 years, did a bit of traveling with them, and then I moved to a telecoms company and did a lot of traveling when I worked there.
So in your room with the world map, how many countries already been tapped in that you and your wife had traveled together?
Somewhere between 35 and 40. I would have to go and count.
Wow.
I've just added a new one though. I was in South Africa at the time that we're recording this. I was in South Africa last week. So new pins went into the board. But I think between 35 and 40 countries so far.
One day Vietnam going to be on the list pinned. Okay.
Yes. Yes. I will get to Ho Chi Minh City.
Absolutely. If you get to Vietnam, no need to be in Ho Chi Minh City. Anywhere we fly there. So we love flying also. So Chris, so after 20 years of transitioning into what you are doing now, it means that there must be something in between that makes you feel the communication is something that needed. Okay. We want to bring you to that journey now. To tell us since when it started.
Well, since before university, I always talked a lot. And I thought that was good communication. I was a good communicator because I was very capable and able to talk. And for anyone listening, that's not what good communication is. Just talking a lot is not good communication. But it took me a long time to learn that. And in one of my early jobs, a company called Kinetic, it's an engineering defense company in the UK, I was very fortunate to work with a lot of people, but one of them was a chap called Carlos de Poms, and he'd worked for McKinsey, and he taught me in 6 months how to take a huge idea and boil it down into a single page or just 3 to 5 sentences to be able to get a complex message across. Now, most of this was in a sales type environment. We were bidding for big contracts. But the point was how to get a complex thing and make it simple and make it concise. And that was the moment that I really started my journey to understanding better communication. Then through the rest of my employed career, which was 20 years of employed with other people, I think I changed companies 6 times. I'd need to look that up, but around 5 or 6 times. And each time I started to develop my interest in communication, and I would learn from the best communicators around me. I would learn and study communication from various courses and programs. And I was often finding that I'd get put into fast track development schemes. So fast track to become a manager, fast track to become, initially graduate scheme, fast track, management fast track, and then the executive level fast track. And they all had communication skills, like stuff in them. And I say stuff because it wasn't very well defined. There was always a module or a course or a program about communication, and it was usually quite vague. It wouldn't be, one of the pieces of advice we get given is to be a good communicator, you should be clear and concise. And I would sit there and put my hand up and say, okay, that's good, but how? And there was never an answer. It was always this fluffy, sort of vague, well, it depends, and well, you just need to say less and be on point, but there was never a real structure to it. And the engineer inside me was crying out for, give me a formula, give me a method or a framework. And eventually, that's what led me to write The First Minute. It's a literal framework for how to be clear and concise.
Wow. We're going to get into that first book in a minute, okay? I wanna see and a lot of our audiences want to know that engineer inside of you cried out, to figure out the equation that makes, human individual can communicate better. And then that made you into the path of researching and started writing your first book, The First Minute, right? So I want to bring you to the moment of realizing that formulation. Tell us what happened at that moment, please.
There's a little bit of a story before that
Yeah.
moment. So I was in a fairly senior position. I was no longer doing engineering. I'd been a project manager and a director of a project office. And then I started doing very large programs, merger and acquisitions, joint ventures, very high value things. This was in America. I'd moved to America by this point. And I was struggling with my career, with life, with family and work. Incredibly stressful job, new baby, wife who was traveling, no family support because they were all in Europe when we were in America. And those things came together to make me quite ill. I ended up being very, very unwell. I was in hospital for a while. And I needed to change something in my work. I needed to move into something that would be more fulfilling and less stressful. And at the same time, I'd begun to teach people the way that I communicated, because I was the one who was always called on to give the status update to the senior person, or to deliver the bad news, or to summarize the complicated thing. So I started teaching the people in my team. I started teaching my department, and then I ended up being invited to talk to a 300-person department in a totally different area of the business to teach them how to be clear and concise. So I was running these training events, and then I had this health issue, and my wife and I decided we wanted to leave America and go back to be closer to our families. Okay, we had a young daughter. And my best friend came up to me and said, "You should teach this communication stuff. And by the way, if you don't, I'm going to come and slap you every day until you do." And he did. He came and he bonked me on the head every day. And I realized that, well, I need to give this a go. And that was the moment. You asked what is the moment where I realized that there was a formula and started doing it. It was that moment. All these things came together. And I said, okay, so if I need to really teach this stuff, then I have to be certain that what I'm teaching is right. Because there's a difference between helping people in my department and my company and saying, here's how I give good status updates, here's how I boil things down to their essence. There's a difference between that and putting something out into the world and saying, this is how you do it, and having complete strangers who didn't know my reputation within the company. And that was the point that I got really serious about getting the formula tight. Not just good, but really making sure that it was fully accurate. And so that was the moment.
Wow. What's your best friend's name?
Rob Olben.
Rob. Rob Holborn. Okay. Tell him that he did a wonderful job. That pushing a friend to the fullest potential, so that you can help a lot of people to get better at communicating, the fundamental core of human beings, for us to
I can't tell him he did a good thing, because then he would hold that over me forever. No, never tell them that they're doing a good thing. No, absolutely I will. I owe him a phenomenal amount for guiding me into this and then pushing me into it. I also owe my wife just everything. She supported me when we left. I left a very good, stable, well-paid job to take a chance on doing what I do now.
Exactly.
And she was never in doubt. She never doubted me. She helped me make good decisions. And the best blessing of all is she gave me the gift of time.
Wow.
Because when starting a business, and writing books and teaching and so on, you have to work fast to keep the lights on.
Yeah.
And she gave me the time and the confidence to say, I have 3 years to make this business work.
Wow.
And that made an incredible difference. So knowing that I had 3 years meant I could go about doing this right rather than rushed.
So So we know Rob already. How about your wife and your daughter? What's her names?
Danielle is my wife, and
Yeah.
my daughter's name is Aviana.
Aviana. Well, I
Yeah.
never heard the name Aviana. Tell Aviana and Danielle that they are now having a new family, new friends in Vietnam. Okay,
I,
so I
I
would love to
will. I
see
will
them in
pass that
person
on.
also. Yeah. So writing, right? So writing, but you could write everything, anything. What? So tell us the idea of the first minute. How did you, as an engineer and becoming a communication expert, form the idea to write the first minute?
Well, the first thing I should confess is the first minute is not the book I wanted to write. It is not
Ah,
the book that I set out and planned to write. So when I started doing what I do now, I had a very clear idea of what it was I was going to teach. And my plan was to teach technical experts to talk to business people, specifically IT and software developers to talk to non-IT, non-software people. And bridging that technical to business divide was where my focus was going to be.
mm,
The problem was every time I sat down to write that book, and every time I talked to an individual or a team or did some training, I always ended up talking about the first minute, because if you can't be clear and concise, everything else is pointless. You could be the
mm,
best, you could be a great storyteller, you could have wonderful body language, you could be able to explain technology in a non-technology way. But if you can't do it in a way that is clear and concise, it doesn't matter. So I kept coming back to this topic and realized, well, I just have to write that book first so I could
mm.
get it out of the way and then move on to the book that I wanted. And it's a good thing I did, because the first minute has just been a core part of my business since I started.
Wow. So teach us the formula then. When you say that clear and concise, right? It's all qualitative and there's no formula in there. So it's like back then when a lot of people tell you about, like, you know, clear and concise in their own definition, it was frustrating you, right? So when you
Oh
write the
yeah.
first book, the first minute, and you have people to be clear and concise in the first minute, all right? How can we do that, please?
Okay. There are
Uh-huh.
two frameworks, and they're very simple. The first one is called framing. The second one is called a GPS summary. And framing sets up the conversation. And I'll explain what it does in a moment, but I'm going to tell you what it is first. So framing is context, intent, and a key message. Context, intent, and a key message.
Mm.
These are three things that every human being, regardless of culture, regardless of social status, regardless of education, these are the three things that we need at a neurological level to be able to pay attention, keep focused, and understand what a conversation is going to be about. So
Mm.
context, intent, and key message. Context answers the following question: what are you talking about? If you're ever listening to someone and you think, what are you talking about? They've not given you context. And it's as simple as naming the topic. I'd like to talk to you about next month's sales report. I'd like to talk to you about the team meeting last week.
Mm.
Naming the topic, because when we start talking, you have all sorts of things in your head, and it's not what I want to talk about.
Yeah.
So I need to start by pushing those things out of your mind and saying, hey, I want to talk about last week's team meeting, next month's sales report, the Jefferson account, whatever it happens to be. So that's
Mm.
context, and it gets people's attention. It pushes other stuff out of their minds. The second thing is intent. This is what I want you to do with the information.
Mm.
And if we don't do this, you spend time thinking, why are you telling me this? And when you eventually work out why they're telling you something, you have to go back in the conversation to get that information you need, because you've not been able to process it. And there's a whole bunch of actual neurological reasons. There's something called working memory, where we have about 20 seconds to understand what to do with a piece of information. And if we don't get it in 20 seconds, we start forgetting the information.
Yeah.
So context and intent, what is the topic? What do I want you to do with it? And then the third thing is a headline. It's the key message. It's not the background. It's not all of the context and detail and information. It's the headline so that you know how to interpret everything else that comes next.
Wow. And then why did you name the book The First Minute?
Because, and I went round in a lot of circles on this. When you title a book, the title is one of the last things that you do before it publishes. And it's because everything in the book relates to getting the first minute right. You need to do these two things, framing and often a structured summary in the first minute. Otherwise, the rest of the conversation, you're trying to make up for the mistakes that you've made. If you don't get the first minute right, you can waste 5, 10, 15 minutes, and you still have to come back and deliver this information in a way that people understand. So you might as well get the first minute right straight away.
Wow. And then you say that you have to, every time you want to write a book, the first minute came up, so you need to write that book first before you move on and write something else, something that the book that you want. You have the new one that came out in 2022, right?
I've had a few books, yes. In 2022, I had Effective Emails, which is, again, it's a guide and a structure for how to write emails that don't annoy people, and how to write emails that other people read and actually respond to. So if you want to get better replies and spend less time in your email inbox, Effective Emails is a series of formula and structure for how to do that.
And then, is there any other one on the way coming?
There was one that, as we're recording this, 3 weeks ago, I launched a new book called 39 Ways to Make Training Stick.
Oh.
And it's my shiny new baby. I'm very excited about it.
Let's talk about that one. 39 Ways Making Training Stick, right? Okay. Tell us, what is that book about?
This book is exactly what the cover says. So the full title is 39 Ways to Make Training Stick, What to Do After Trainees Leave the Room. And it's a literal guide for each of the 39 ways for how you can choose, then design, and then implement methods to help people remember what they're taught. And this came about because in July, August last year, a number of my sort of co-trainers, I'm in a number of training and author groups, a number of them were talking about, what do you do to help people remember the training after you've delivered it? And so we started a conversation and realized that a few people did these things, and I did these 7 or 8 things, and someone else had 3 or 4 more. And I started to gather them together. And as the conversation went on, I realized that every single one of my corporate clients in 2023 and before that, every single one had asked me what I was going to do to help people remember the training. And they usually asked me before they asked about the price. So it's an important question. So with this, with my author group and my training buddies talking about it, and then realizing that it was an important question that I'd been asked multiple times, I thought maybe there's something in this. I also thought, wow, someone must have written the book on this already. There's going to be books about how to do it. And there is nothing. There's no simple, practical guide for trainers, instructors, people working in learning and development to say, what can I do to make this training stick? So I took all of those ideas from my friends. I took my own ones. I spent some time thinking about more, and then wrote down, well, how do I do them? What is it? How does it work? And then literally how to build it, and then wrote an example or used an example that I already had. And I put it all together and I wrote the book.
Wow. How could you open the reservoir of receiving concerns and problems from other all the time for you to come up with the solution and helping them to make the job better, make the training stick. Teach us how can we open that curiosity to obtain information and think about the solution.
Oh, what a wonderful question. I don't think anyone has ever asked me something like that before. It's a really lovely question. So how can we all do it? So if I deconstruct my process, what I find is that if either I'm part of a conversation or I'm listening to people complain about something and talk about a problem, I'm only happy listening to the problem for a short amount of time before it starts to feel frustrating, because the problem exists, but what are we going to do about it? What can we do about it? What tiny little step can we take to make that problem smaller or less likely to happen or make it go away? And that is a natural part of how I think. But if anyone listening to this is wondering how to build that habit, it actually works nicely with the second framework in the first minute, which is a goal, problem, solution framework. It's how you can summarize complex things. It's how you can talk about lots of different topics simply. We all have a goal to achieve something. It might be huge sales targets for a company. It might be, I have a goal of sending an email to someone by the end of the day. They're all goals. And we face problems in achieving those things. And the work that we do is finding, building, and reporting on solutions to those problems. And that way of thinking helps me when we get stuck in those complaining conversations. People go, oh, this is a problem, and that's a problem, and then this is why it's bad. And those are only the first two parts of that framework. We all want to go home on Friday, but the problem is there's so much work and we've got this deadline. And everyone gets stuck in that problem conversation. Take a step further and say, okay, what is a solution, the solution? What are 5 possible solutions? What is a way we can make the problem slightly smaller? What can we do about it? And that's the mindset. Because once you start looking at what can we do, you'll be amazed at how many solutions you find.
Beautiful, beautiful. And I need to give some bit of applause to you, Chris, for not only you help people to communicate well using the first minute of opportunity when the opportunity, right? But it seems to me that everything that you are doing is always right at the first minute also, so that the authors, the friends, the colleagues come to you and ask how did you do it, and they learn from you also from your experience. So what did you do differently that can set you in everything that you do? You make it right at the beginning already.
I think it was from a young age. I've always wanted to achieve. I've been very achievement driven. If someone says you have to get here, well, then I want to get there. I don't want to fall short of that. So wanting to achieve things has shaped my desire to get stuff done. Although I do describe myself as slightly lazy. So I will do 10 hours work today so that I only have to do 1 hour's work tomorrow. which is sort of a future laziness. Like I'll work really hard today because I just don't want to do this tomorrow. The problem is there's always something else to do tomorrow, so I end up being busy the whole time. Yeah. But I'm driven by an inherent desire to not need to do things. So, for example, if someone listening to this has in their job, if they have to report something and provide information to somebody, and they find themselves creating a report every week, and it takes 4 hours, what can they do? It might take 10 hours this week, but what can they do to turn that 4-hour task into a 1-hour task every week from now on? Can they build a template? Can they automate some of it? Can they find a way that someone else can provide information? Not not dodging the work, not making somebody else do it, but is there a way to automate, to use templates, to work on the efficiency of what they're doing? Because a little bit of extra time now will save you a lot of time every time going forwards.
Was there anybody in your life, in your family, or like works, be a role model, influence in you in that way of thinking?
My father was always a great, and still is, a great problem solver. He's a very practical man. He spent his life working with his hands, building things. He could fix practically anything. I have some wonderful memories as a child in his woodworking workshop, where he would create all kinds of things out of wood. We'd be driving along and through some woodland, and he would stop because he saw like the trunk of a fallen tree that he could then turn into all sorts of things, beautiful salad bowls, into furniture. He built staircases. He built the upstairs of the house. And his mentality was never to get flustered or excited, or he never showed his frustration. He always looked at a problem and just worked out what to do. And he taught me and my sister, you just take these small steps. You can't build a staircase in one go. You have to build it. You also don't build it one step at a time because it falls over. You have to build a frame and then fill in. And I think that's the key. It's rather than just taking lots of steps and not going in a particular direction, work out where you want to go. And then put in a scaffolding or a framework or a simple structure, and then you can start filling in the details within that structure to get what you're after.
And we go back to the 39 ways of making training stick, right? Is that the book for trainers, or is that also for the learners also, Chris?
I wrote it for trainers, because if you deliver training, you should be thinking about what happens to trainees after they leave the room. That is something you can't afford to ignore that. But, and this has really surprised me, a lot of people have bought the book who don't work in training or learning and development, because they want to find a way to help their own self-improvement, and they want to find ways to make their own training, their own development stick. I mentioned I was in South Africa. I did a 2-week tour, lots of training events, and people turned up who weren't in the training, learning and development space. And one person came up to me afterwards and said, what I love about this is for every single training I go to in the future, I can ask them, what are they going to do to help me remember what they've taught? And they now have the answers, and they said, I feel better about asking that question.
Wow.
So did not expect that to happen. I don't think, it's certainly not like The First Minute, which is a book that anyone can get benefit from. But when you put something out into the world, people will find a way to make it work for them if it helps solve a problem that they have.
Beautiful, beautiful. So why not 39? Why not 41?
Well, originally it was 42. Well, originally it was 13, and then I sat down and sort of came up with my own ideas, did a bunch of searching online, talked to other people to build up a list. And I got to 42. It was originally 42 ways to make training stick. And then as I went through it, I realized that 2 of the ways were pretty much the same thing. So I combined them. And another couple so that got me down to 41. And another couple were actually in the training event. So there's loads of material on how to run and create very effective training. And you can do lots of things, engaging activities, partner things, making sure you're breaking it up in time, making sure that you're managing the energy levels. There's all sorts of things you can do in the training. And I realized these 2 had snuck their way into my list, and they were in the training session itself. So I said, nope, I'm drawing a very clear line. All of these methods are things that you can do after the training. And that is how I got down got down to 39. I'm sure there are others. So people are beginning to suggest new ideas, and perhaps there'll be a volume 2 at some point. But for now, 39 was enough.
And congratulations for the success of the book. It's only like 3 weeks, new fresh baby of you, right?
Oh yes,
I'm sure
yes,
it's gonna
it's
be.
still very
Yeah,
exciting.
yeah. I know the next question is not gonna be fair for you, okay? But I need to ask that question. So out of the 39, if you pick one that you really like, that you thought of it and you're really proud of it, what
Ooh,
is that one?
the one. Oh, that is an unfair question.
I know, I'm
The
sorry.
one. I'm going to cheat in my answer then. I very, very rarely use just one.
Hmm.
You don't want to use them all. Oh, that would be too much. But every type of training, so the training topic and the audience will determine which methods are best for that audience. And having more than one method not only will reinforce the training better, but it also means people with different learning styles will get what they would like from it. So here's an example, and this came from delivering this training last week. We were talking about email tips. So you run a course, and then people get an email every week or so after they've finished. And for some people who work in a corporate environment where email is a familiar, well-used technology, that can help. But if you're working with a younger audience, and in this case it was a young audience in remote parts of Africa where they don't have computers, where they don't have mobile phones with data, they said email tips are a terrible thing because they just won't have access to them. So the environment that you're training in will affect which method is best. And for that group, it turned out that live in-person follow-up events would have been a better solution for that group. The one that I find most fun is, so I'll try and answer the actual question now, the use of the growing AI and machine learning technology to very, very quickly create apps and software services that people can use to practice and apply what they're learning. There's a lot of very fun things that we can do in that space. And it's only going to get easier as the weeks go by because of the pace of the technology.
Yeah. Wow. I just talked to a lady, her name is Elisa Farif. She's from Italy, and she's also the head of the event management lab at Capgemini. And then she shared a lot of cool things about AI that can help to improve, the world of works and making, like information stick for people through a lot of, maybe it's the two of you, when you guys connect together, it will be wonderful. I'll introduce
Oh, yeah.
you.
Please do that introduction. It's always nice to be introduced to people where we can help solve a problem together.
Yep. And I wanna ask about Danielle. When did she tell you that you have 3 years to prove that you guys that is worth it?
Yeah. So I should clarify. She didn't tell me. It wasn't an instruction. She actually reminded me. She supported me in that. So when we were leaving America, this was the beginning of 2020. We both quit our jobs, sold our house, and we were going to travel the world for a year. And then the world shut down, which meant we didn't do the travel. But that was the point at which I was going to transition into this work. And we talked about it a lot. It was a huge change for our family, going from 2 full-time employed incomes to 1, plus me doing whatever I would come up with. And so we talked about financially what would it mean for us, and we looked at the numbers, and we looked whether we could support ourselves in the way we wanted to. And then, and this is why she's so good, this is one of the many reasons she is so wonderful, she asked me questions about how long does it take to set up a business? What did I think a good strategy would be? Who did I know who'd done a similar thing, and how long did it take them? And we had a lot of conversations around that. And I was doing a lot of research into what it would take to do my new job. So having done all of that and answered all these questions, she said, so how long do you think you need? And I said, a year? And she said, no. What do you mean? She says, well, you've just spent, we've been talking about this for a couple of weeks on and off. She said, everything you told me says you need more than a year. And I went, yes, well, and she repeated back the things that I'd been telling her. And she said, it sounds like you need 3 years. I said, yeah, that would be really nice. But she goes, no, if you need 3 years, you need 3 years. That's how long you've got. If you can't make it work in 3 years, you've got to go and get a job. But she used my own answers against me. And it was brilliant. Because if she hadn't, I'd have put myself under pressure to deliver in 1 year. Yeah. And I'd have made short-term decisions. Whereas what I could actually do was look at my 3 years and make long-term decisions, which I believe now, the benefit of hindsight, I believe now that I've been able to succeed in what I'm doing because I had that time and I had the support without feeling like I had to earn an income on day one straight away. And that, what a gift she gave me.
I would love to see her. I would love to interview her also to bring down that moment again. But from my opinion, Chris, even if in 1 year, you're going to nail it. You are the person that's solving problems. So it's a little stressed, but you're going to nail it. So I believe so.
It would have been. Well, thank you. Maybe, luckily, I won't ever know that because I had the time and I was able to build things right. And now I'm looking at the next 3 years and what I can do in that time.
And my curious question is, what is she saying now about that 3 years plan that we had in the past?
She said, good, I'm glad you did it because you would not have wanted to go back to work.
Very optimistic person. I love it. Very humor also. I love having humor at home and at work. I have two last questions for our conversation today. All right. And you mentioned this word a lot in our conversation, thinking. All right. My wife and I, we have been on the quest to help people to improve their ability to think, because we believe that have a good chance start by a good thinking, right? And our ability to think these days is diminishing, unfortunately. And if we can listen to the expert, we can learn from the expert, the good thinker around the world, on how they improve their ability to think over the years. Listen, reflect, learn, and apply their practices. Then hopefully we can improve our ability to think also. So, Chris, how have you been improve your ability to think over the years?
My ability to think has been improved by one tool, one very, very, very important tool, a pencil.
Pencil. Wow.
A pencil. You could use a pen, but let's go with the pencil. With a pencil, I write a lot slower than I think. And I used to believe that was a bad thing. The trouble is, we don't capture the thoughts when they happen quickly. So the ability to think, for me, and for many of the smart people that I have the pleasure of knowing and the honor of knowing, getting a pencil and writing it down. What do I want to achieve? What is standing between me and achieving it? Just lists, don't overthink it. Just get the things out of your head and write them down. What are some of the things I can do to solve those problems, to make those problems smaller, to reduce the chance of those problems happening? And write them down. A pencil, you can always rub it out. But it slows you down. Writing means you're going from just thinking to actually doing. And you can start to create a plan. You can start to break a problem down into smaller pieces.
Wow.
And I'm a big fan of lists. I love a list. A list I can cross things off. The great thing about a list is you've got to create one in the first place, which means you have to think about what you're going to do and how you're going to do it. And then you can track your progress by just crossing the things off. So thinking starts by slowing down and writing down. So grab a pencil, whatever problem you're trying to solve, grab a pencil, start step 1, write what you want to achieve. What is that goal? Step 2, what are the things that I need to do, that I need to overcome, that are standing between me and achieving that goal? Step 3, and this is the fun part, how many different ways can I think of to solve them?
Wow, beautiful. Actually, I have 2 questions, but I need to add one more in.
Okay.
You ask really good questions yourself, and asking and which is the practice that not a lot of people are doing. That we ask questions for other people, but you ask really good questions for your own self also. So I just wanna, because I promised my speaking coach that I'm gonna ask bizarre questions every time I had a chance to talk to a speaker. Okay. So what is a normal question Chris Fenning is asking himself every day?
Why am I doing this? A normal question, so without being silly, a normal question is, how can I do this more efficiently?
More
And
efficient.
can I tell a little story to make this real?
Please.
So while I'm in this role and I have my own business, I don't work 60 or 80 hours a week. I used to. And now I'm doing my own business. I thought I would be working 60 plus hours a week because that's what culture has told us we need to do. But I wasn't able to because my wife has very fixed hours for her job. So I do the school drop-offs. I do most of the school pickups, most of the laundry. So there's a lot of things that I do, like dance classes and things during the afternoon after school. That's my role. That's part of my responsibility for having the ability to not work for someone else and just work for myself. That was part of the agreement I had with my wife. So I only had a limited amount of time, and I found myself getting very frustrated. Now, in case no one's wondering where this is going, this is relating to being efficient, and this is the question I ask myself. So I found myself very frustrated. I'm starting my own business. I should be working really hard. I should be doing all these things, but I can't. It's so annoying. It's not fair. And I realized I had a choice. I could just complain about the problem, or I could find the solution. And so what I did was I worked out I have 28 hours a week that I can work. That's all I get without eating into family time or avoiding other responsibilities. So what can I do if I only have 28 hours and I can't get more hours? How can I do more in those hours? How can I be more efficient? And that's been the theme through my life. How can I make this better? How can we make this process more efficient? And what it led to were actually some things I teach and sell. I run a program for other people who want to write books and sort of want to be experts in their space, for how they can go from an idea and create 16 different types of content that they can use for social media, they can give away, they can sell, they can turn into books, they can turn into workshops and programs. And I found a way to reuse everything that I do, which means every half hour of work I do is half an hour that goes towards creating at least 16 different things, which means I've done 8 hours worth of work in half an hour. It's incredibly efficient. So that's the one question, is how can I do this more efficiently?
Then you own the world for that book. You own the world for writing that book, to help them to make the best out of the time, right? So
it's a work in progress. I actually have a draft of it. The irony is the book is quite long because there's 16 different types of content. So it's a really long book at the moment. I like very short books. So I'm working to get that down, but it's coming.
Maybe write in the different volumes. So break it down into 4, so you have 4 volumes for that.
That is a very good idea. It might end up being a series. Yeah. I like that. That's a really good idea. It's very simple problem, very simple solution to the problem I had. I like that. Yeah. And this is why we need to talk to other people. It doesn't matter how good we are in our own field. One conversation, one sentence from another person, and you think, oh yeah, that's a really easy, obvious solution. Why don't I do that? So thank you.
Yeah. The last question, Chris, is about the future. So we know that you want to become a dinosaur when you were little, right? And you want to become a pilot when you were, and then that dream of being a pilot took place into your years later, and now you become an author, famous to help people to communicate and get better at communication. It's the fundamental core, like of human beings. I always believe that. So it's not fair we don't talk about the future a little bit. Okay. So is there anything that exciting you are working on you want to share with us so that we can celebrate with you in advance?
Ooh. I've got about 5 books that are partly written, so there'll be a lot more books coming soon. The next most exciting thing is this is a working title. Earlier on, I mentioned that the title is one of the last things that comes out of a book. But I'm working on something. I'm finally working on the book I originally set out to write, the one about bridging that expert to non-expert, and it's called currently Relevant, Relatable, Jargon Free, and it is a framework and a guide for how anybody can talk about their area of expertise, and they can talk about it in a way that everybody else will understand.
Wow. Congratulations first is to really working on the book that you set out to write at the beginning, right? And that's really helpful for a universal book like that to help everybody at every job doing the works that they are doing can explain what they are doing in a minute for people to understand also.
Yes.
So thanks. I look forward to reading that book, Chris, and thanks again for being so nice to spend your afternoon joining our show, sharing your amazing journey with a lot of beautiful advices that we can, I and the audience will reflect and learn from. And I love to meet you and your family in person. Put it into the bucket list and let's make it happen.
Yes, the pin is in the map. We will definitely make it happen at some point. So, it has been wonderful talking with you today. Thank you so much for having me on the show.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Say hello to Danielle and Ariana, right? Ariana?
I will do that. Yep, I absolutely will.
And make sure you say hello to Bob for me also.
Yes, I'm going to call Rob after this and let him know that I've been talking about him.
Bye bye, my friend. You have a wonderful afternoon. Okay.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you. Bye bye.